Thank you for watching us on YouTube. But did you know that if you're on the go, you can get the full show as a podcast now? You can get our morning breakdown of the most important topics facing our country, news not being covered by the mainstream media, interviews with change-making progressives, and info on what you can actually do about all this. Search for The Damage Report on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you know when new episodes are ready to go. Donald Trump has what he is calling NAFTA 2.0. He's very unhappy with NAFTA for a very long time, thinks it's a terrible deal, horribly bargained or negotiated. He's got a new version, okay, and he's very excited about that. But a lot of the details are, they're above my head. So we're bringing on an expert. This is Lori Wallach, Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch, who's gonna help us break down this new version of NAFTA. Lori, welcome to the show.
Hi guys.
Glad to have you here. So look, he's very excited about this. It's the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement. First of all, I have read that much of his rhetoric around this new deal sort of exaggerates how different it is from the one before. In your view, which is obviously a more expert view, how significant of a change is this from the prior version of NAFTA?
Well, this isn't a transformative replacement of the entire corporate rigged US trade agreement model that got initially hatched with NAFTA in the 1990s. There are some big changes. There are some big changes that reflect longstanding demands by progressives and unions. And there are some big changes that would actually make it worse. So it's going in both directions. I would say it's a work in progress. There's some things that aren't yet done to the nth degree, and it's fairly different, but it's not a wholesale rip it up and chuck it out. I think it's fair to call it something like NAFTA 2.0 versus just rebrand it with a new name, which, it's certainly different, but it's not a new planet.
So why don't we begin to break it down? Is there anything in this new deal so far that we know of the details that American workers should look forward to that actually benefits them in comparison to the old regime?
Yes. So the investor protections and those outrageous corporate investor state tribunals, where investors could basically skirt domestic laws in courts and in front of a tribunal of 3 corporate attorneys attack any domestic law or government action claiming it violated their expansive investor rights under NAFTA, and then get unlimited compensation from us taxpayers, that is whacked. So the investor rules that promote outsourcing are just altogether gone. And then those tribunals between the US and Canada are gone. There's a 3-year phase in, but after that it's gone, which is a big deal. That would get rid of 92% of the entire US liability under NAFTA, under that system. And most of the horrible rulings have been US corporations attacking Canadian energy, water, timber policies. So that's good. With respect to Mexico, it's rolled way back so that the really expansive no right to regulate rules are gone. You could still in Mexico get compensation if the government actually takes your property after following some different procedures and rules. So that's good, so less incentives to outsource. Also, there are some improved labor standards. The problem is they're not yet subject to swift and certain enforcement. There's a stunning annex in the labor chapter that would, for the first time, require Mexico's government to change its labor laws to allow the workers in the plants to actually approve their contracts. Right now, Mexico has a plague of fake protection unions. That's part of the reason why wages are down relative to how bad they were at NAFTA, which was bad. And this annex would require the government to replace all those fake contracts in 4 years with real union contracts with secret ballot votes by the workers being represented. There are, for the first time ever, rules that would require for 40% of autos and auto parts and 45% of the value of trucks would have to be produced by workers making $16 an hour or more to get the NAFTA benefits. And then there's this really outrageous anti-conservation policy that was in the old NAFTA that's gotten whacked, that used to force countries to export their water, their oil, their gas. Even if they wanted to conserve, if they started exporting, they couldn't stop. So those are the good news things. It's not just for workers, it's for people and the planet, but those are improvements. Now, just to be clear, The labor stuff with the Mexico labor rights and some other improvements to the labor chapter, unless there is more seriously improved enforcement, then that chapter will not stop US companies from continuing to outsource jobs, dump their toxins in Mexico, and bring the products back here after paying people in Mexico despicable wages. So that's work in progress right there.
Okay, and honestly surprising to me that there was any concern whatsoever for their labor contracts. You mentioned the 4-year period where they have to replace them with something more substantive, but you're saying it's going to come down to enforcement. How likely is it that if in 4 years it turns out that things are nothing better, are we going to scrap the entire deal, or is it more likely that they'll just say, oh well?
Well, here's the deal about that, which is why I say this is a work in progress. And if folks care about any of this, now is the time to get engaged, because the vote won't happen in Congress until at least February, end of February 2019. So there's still a lot that can change. And so the big push is to get new language in the legislation that would implement the deal. So they can sign this deal at the end of November, but it doesn't mean, it's not worth the paper it's written on unless Congress approves it. Yeah. It can't go into effect. Well, so there's a lot of leverage with Congress. So the implementing legislation could establish new rights and abilities, ways for those standards to be enforceable directly. And actually, the labor unions in Mexico have been working with their counterparts in the US, and the US unions have been working with the only decent cabinet member in the entire administration, a guy named Robert Lighthizer, who's the US trade representative, to try and create some creative ways that enforcement could be made more meaningful. And that we'll see. We'll have to wait and see what the whole final package is. Now, I don't want to make this sound too great, because that's important. Those are important changes. Those are important. Those would be real improvements if that stuff's made enforceable. It could make a difference in stopping NAFTA's ongoing damage. We've already seen 1 million jobs certified, US jobs certified as lost to NAFTA, and the outsourcing continues every week. Mm-hmm. So this is damage that is ongoing that has to be stopped. But there's stuff in there that makes it worse.
And what would be examples of that?
The worst of the worst is just an incredible bunch of giveaways to big pharmaceutical firms. So there are all kinds of new monopoly rights, yes, in a free trade agreement, more monopoly rights that would shield big pharma from competition. So no generic drugs for longer periods of time.
Oh God.
And one of the most egregious things is a 10-year exclusivity period on biologic drugs, which would really screw things up in Mexico and Canada, but lock us in place too. And that's an area where those drugs cost $100,000 a year per patient. Oh. So there's been a huge push in Congress to try and limit that monopoly protection here, and instead it's locked in and exported to Mexico and Canada. And there's some other really obnoxious things like that for the pharmaceutical companies that would let them have longer monopolies. There is stuff and that language came from the TPP. And there is stuff from the TPP that would limit regulation in e-commerce, that could undermine our privacy. That stuff that is new rights and protections for the big platforms to be able to not give government regulators access to the algorithms they use, which get to issues of discrimination and anti-competitive behavior. There are rules in there that extend copyrights so that the content industry has more rights and powers. There's language in there that just sort of the usual outrageous trade agreement garbage that limits product safety and food safety inspections. And I mean, it's a trend of all of our past trade agreements through Democrats and Republicans have been miserable. So that stuff is not fixed. There is even one really cynical thing, which is Donald Trump, Mr. Buy American, Hire American, left the waiver to Buy American in the NAFTA. Before NAFTA, if the government bought goods or services, they had to, since FDR, have preferences for domestic made goods. And that kept your tax dollars getting reinvested into your communities. So under NAFTA, suddenly there's a waiver. So stuff made in Mexico or Canada counts as Buy American. So shocker, General Electric and the big 3 automakers and all these guys who get gazillions in government contracts move production to Mexico. They make a big margin of profit, take our tax dollars, pay people $1.50 an hour wage to work just as hard. as their US counterpart was making $25 an hour to do, and just walk the whole way laughing to the bank. That provision is not reversed, and that was a key demand. So that's super cynical.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, maybe in the near future, though, we can hope to see MAGA hats made in Mexico instead of China. That'd be a nice change. Well, Lori, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do want to have you back on to talk a little bit more about the negatives, and also, depending on who ends up gaining control of Congress in November, that will, of course, help to determine what ends up with this bill. So hopefully we can reconnect and talk a little bit more then.
That'd be great. If people want to dig into the details, we are literally just about to post an analysis of the whole damn 500-page text, and it's going to be posted at tradewatch.org. That's www.tradewatch.org. Highlights, lowlights, work to be done.
Awesome. Thank you, Lori. Lori Walk, Director of Public Citizens Global Trade Watch. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.